Hi guys, it's Kevin from the Healing Hands Duo, and today we're gonna kind of take a walk through memory lane basically. So we're gonna go through kind of the last 10 plus years of my life really. Most of you know now, if you've been watching this channel, that I've been struggling with Lyme disease, and it's been a battle, and this whole video is just to basically kind of walk through what that whole process was for me. I kind of want to share my experience with you guys, and this is kind of the first time that I've ever really done that. You know, Jesse and I kind of went through this whole process together, and between the two of us, we're the only ones that really know, what this journey was like. So I think now it's time I want to share that with you guys, because I feel, Lyme disease is a big, it's a serious illness. It is, and anybody that's watching this that has it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think anybody that goes through this disease and you come out basically on the other side with a success story, I think you have the obligation to share that with others, because there is a lot of people out there struggling right now. And this is the whole purpose to why I want to make this video. This is the whole purpose to basically why Jesse and I started this channel, is just to basically help wherever we can. We've been through a lot, and we've discovered a lot too. So I'm hoping this story kind of, helps some people, and feel free to leave some comments down below, and we'd love to help and answer questions wherever we can. So basically this video, I'm going to kind of divide it up into kind of three parts. So the first part, we're going to basically talk about the beginning stages to where I actually finally got a diagnosis. Basically, there was a lot of years there where a lot of suffering and struggling, and we're going to basically walk through that process and that story. And then we're going to kind of look at my recovery process. When I actually found out what I was dealing with, what was the recovery process like? What did I do? So I'm going to share all that with you guys. And then at the end, we'll go through some conclusions. We'll kind of wrap it all up and kind of hit some key parts here to where, that I think will really help some people, kind of save some trial and error in a lot of this stuff, and kind of, basically my conclusions, to kind of summarize everything. So we'll go through all that as well. So most of the topics that we will discuss, or that I will be discussing, I'm not going to go into great detail. So I'm just going to touch on them just a little bit, because that's the whole purpose of this channel. Jesse's already been doing a fantastic job in sharing a lot of videos so far, and a lot of them are touching on some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So this is just going to be very high level. We're just going to touch on some of the topics, and eventually in time our channel will go much more deeper into that. Okay, so for me, I guess all of this started, I'll go back probably to about 2004. That's where I was in college. I just moved to the big city here from a small town, and I was studying electrical engineering. I was probably in my second year, I would say, and I remember sitting in class one day, and I kind of looked down on my arms, and I found all these kind of scaly patches of skin everywhere. So it was kind of interesting. I kind of went home that night and kind of, looked into other areas on my body, and I found that it wasn't just my arms, it was my legs and my back, my chest. So it was interesting. I didn't really notice that before, and then it was kind of concerning. So I went to the doctor, and of course, they looked at it and said, okay, it might be psoriasis. They were, 80% sure. They weren't positive, but they basically gave me a $300 tube of cream to kind of put on it to see if it would help, and then I went to go see a dermatologist, right? So eventually I did that, and then it was a diagnosis. They took a biopsy of my leg, because there was a big welt on my leg, maybe like this big, and they took a piece of it and they sent it off to the lab, and of course it came back positive for psoriasis. So that's kind of where things started, and it was getting worse and worse and worse by the day too. So I used the cream they gave me. I took the drugs, and for the most part it got rid of it. But then if I stopped taking it, it came back. So it was kind of this cycling back and forth between using this cream. It wasn't cheap. You know, I was in school, I didn't have much money, so, you know, but what else can you do? That's basically what I did for the first several years until, you know, basically the next major event that kind of happened to me was probably about 2006. I started getting really bad heart palpitations. So my heart was beating fast and very irregular, and it was getting more and more intense. So that was concerning and that was interesting. And then I even started having night terrors. So my dreams were getting much more intense and much more, I don't know, a little more dramatic, to where I even started sleepwalking, you know. So I would sleepwalk, I would leave my room. There was even one night there, I guess this was probably when I first met Jessie. I remember we were sleeping one night, and we were both in bed. She was sound asleep, and then she was startled. She woke up, and then when she woke up, she saw me standing at the edge, at the end of the bed. So I was kind of standing at the end of the bed, just kind of looking at her like this, you know, just staring at her. So it was interesting. So I kind of scared the living hell out of her, and you know, I'm sure she would love to talk a little bit more about that. But that was a very regular occurrence for me. I would just kind of get up and walk around, and I'd wake up, you know, in like a pool of sweat. So the sleeping patterns were getting much more intense for me too. So that was happening. And then it got to the point too to where I even started fainting. So I even started blacking out. So most of this I noticed kind of started happening basically after I ate. So after I eat like a, you know, a good dinner, for example, you know, an hour or two later, I would start to get a little more kind of lightheaded, and you know, I'd kind of come in and out. So this was kind of going on for a while, until one event. Basically, I was at work. I was in the cafeteria. I just finished eating dinner, or lunch, sorry. And then I basically I ran up the stairs, because my office was at the top floor. So I basically ran up the stairs, and then when I got to the top of the stairs, I just collapsed. Fell right to the ground. My head kind of smashed into the wall, and you know, I was down maybe just for a couple seconds. Nobody was around. Thank kind of God for that, because that would have been very embarrassing for me. So I got up right away, and I kind of looked around, you know, I kind of was really embarrassed, obviously. So I decided, okay, enough of this. I decided to basically leave work, and I went and kind of went over to the hospital, went to the emergency room. So I went there. Of course, I sat there for several hours. They finally gave me, they admitted me in. They took all kinds of blood tests. They basically didn't find anything. They said, you're basically healthy. You know, they looked at my iron levels, my B12 levels. They looked at, you know, all the other regular blood tests that they usually do, and everything was fine. So they looked at me that, you know, kind of like I was crazy, and they said, you know, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do for you. So they sent me home. So this kept going, you know, by about 2007 now, I would say. This is where I started to have more digestive disturbances now. So anytime I really ate anything, it would just give me kind of gut rot, and, you know, going back and forth to the bathroom here to there too. So I couldn't really digest food properly anymore. So this was kind of added into the mix on top of the celiac, or the psoriasis that I was experiencing. You know, all the night terrors were still happening. The heart palpitations were getting much more intense, way intense. So this was building, right? So I was dealing with all this, and of course, by this time my energy levels were shot. You know, I couldn't do anything. I just wanted to sleep all the time, and, you know, I couldn't even get out of bed most days. So that was happening. And it was basically finally that I think my mom came to me and said, look, there's this woman in just outside where we lived, and she's a holistic nutritionist. So why don't we go there and see if there's something maybe that you're eating that could be contributing to this. I thought, okay, well, I was kind of desperate, and I was looking for any kind of relief at this point. So I said yes. I booked an appointment. I went to go see her, and sure enough, I found that I had a major intolerance to gluten and dairy, 2 of them. So she basically told me, don't eat these anymore. They're ruining you. So this was kind of a shocker. I would never really, at that point, I never really could have made the connection between my food and all these other things I was experiencing. So that was a big kind of aha moment, and that was, you know, well, it was over 10 years ago now. So back then, you know, it doesn't seem that long ago, but to find anything gluten-free was not easy. Like, they didn't have anything in the grocery store. Most of the restaurants, they'd look at you, if you mentioned gluten, they would look at you like you were crazy. So that was interesting. I remember that. That was a real struggle to kind of shift my food around to try and eliminate that, right? It wasn't easy. So the next thing, that kept going, and I didn't really know what to do about it. I tried to, a few changes to my diet, but I didn't really know what to do. So it wasn't long after that, and that's when Jessie was starting to go through her experiences. Actually, they were starting well before that as well. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, and I would look over at her, and she'd be just kind of curled up in the fetal position, and she'd be just
I was really scared.
Basically in tears, just crying, saying her stomach was just hurting so much, and she was in so much pain, and of course, you kind of feel helpless, right, when you're going through that. Plus, I was going through all the horrible things I was going through at the time too, so it was just made it that much more tough for us. So that continued on for a while. After a few more months of that, there was basically one time where, again, I woke up in the middle of the night and she was there kind of crying and in constant pain, and they said that's enough. I basically grabbed her, we kind of went over to the emergency room to the hospital and admitted her in, and yeah, for her it didn't really take too much. She was, they booked her in for a colonoscopy right away, and sure enough, it wasn't long after that she found out she had ulcerative colitis. So that was huge, when that diagnosis came, and all the things kind of shifted from all the misery I was going through to her. And the doctors didn't have any answers. They said, this is something that you're going to have to go through for the rest of your life, and we got lots of medication for you, of course. So, and that's the route she took. She took a lot of medication. She took the Pentasa, the pain meds, and she took the the other meds that she can talk about that. But so she went that route, and I kind of went that route too when I started with psoriasis. So we kind of went the medical route. We took the meds, we did all the things that they were telling us to, right? I mean, that's kind of what you do. So we started there. I think that's important to kind of mention that, because that's where that's where it all started for us. So the other key point I want to talk about on this too is that even though I didn't know what I was struggling with yet, this was just kind of building up for me, even though in Jessie, she kind of found out what she did have, but both of us were struggling at the same time. So we were going through something serious. And I think it's worth mentioning that if you're going through some kind of chronic illness like this with your spouse, you're never going through that alone. You're never going through that alone. Even if you are the one that is suffering from whatever illness that you have, and you have a spouse that maybe is in good health, it doesn't matter. And I think anybody that's watching this right now that has Lyme, and anybody that if their spouse is watching, will exactly know what I'm talking about. It's you're sharing the same experience together, and it takes its toll on both of you, even though there's one that's struggling more so with the health, but on an emotional level and multiple other levels, there's more to it than that. So, but with Jessie and I, we kind of went through this in kind of a unique way. We were both struggling, so we were both trying to get well together. It's not like one was kind of kind of nursing the other or whatever, right? We were both seriously sick, so we kind of had to find our way on our own, and we did everything together. We tried everything together. You'll see when I start getting into some of this stuff, we went into a lot of different areas, and I had a kind of a hell of a time trying to prepare for this video, because you look back at more than 10 years of your life. It kind of shocked us both when we looked at each other like, do you remember going through this stuff? Do you remember doing this? Do you remember, there's just so much that came to the surface here when I started preparing for this. It's crazy. So that's kind of why I wanted to share this with you. So Jessie basically got a diagnosis of ulcerative colitis at this point. I was struggling, so she took the meds, she did all those things, what the doctors were saying, and she kind of was really motivated to kind of, get some answers, right? She didn't like the fact that you know, the drugs or whatever, that's what you're going to have to do for the rest of your life. She didn't accept that. So she basically found some private care downtown Toronto. She found kind of a private doctor that's a little bit outside the box in some cases. So she found him, and then that's where she kind of was introduced to the SCD diet, which is the specific carbohydrate diet, which I think Jesse's talked about that in a few other videos. So she bought the book, she read the book, and that diet is specifically for, you know, digestive illnesses, you know, like celiac or ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or something like that, right? So we decided to do that. We decided, let's give it a try. You know, why not? What we're doing isn't working, so we got to do something different. So we did that. And I remember she came home and she was motivated probably way more than me at the time. So she kind of, you know, was the driving force at the beginning of all this. But yeah, we cleaned out our cupboards, we threw everything away and kind of just started fresh. We went through and kind of found SCD safe foods to eat, and we started doing that. And I noticed, oh man, it wasn't long, months after we started that, my psoriasis started to kind of, the flare-ups were getting less and less and less. Even to the point where a lot of my patches went away on their own, just from the diet. So it had a profound impact on us both. So with her too, I mean, she eventually got to the point where her diet was basically, she was not even basically taking any medication at all at this point, just from the diet. That's all we were doing. So, and for me, I didn't really have to use much of my psoriasis cream. So this was a huge kind of discovery at the very beginning of all this. So we continued on this for the next several years, actually. And things got to get better. You know, we kind of somewhat had I'm going to say somewhat of a normal life. You know, nothing, ever since I met Jesse, our life has never been normal. We basically had a year there before I actually started getting sick to, we went out and did normal things, or I don't even, using the word normal, which I don't think the things we were doing were normal anyway, but we'll leave that. But basically we weren't battling disease at the time, is basically what I'm going to say. So we went out and did other things, you know, we went out and had fun, and we had some good times together, but it was limited. So basically most of the time that we've known each other, we've been battling some pretty serious problems. So, but you know, everything kind of happens for a reason sometimes too, and I believe that. So it's been a journey for sure. So we continued on this diet for the next couple of years, and then by 2011, I had some friends that were getting married, so we had a trip to Mexico. So we spent a week in Mexico. You know, we had a wedding. It was probably one of the best vacations we've had. It was a beautiful, beautiful time, you know, great friends. And I had some interesting experiences there. You know, we decided to veer off the resort one day, and we decided to do some cave diving. They have all these caves in Mexico there where you can, you know, you can swim under, and you can, you know, it's pretty beautiful actually. So we went into this cave, and there was also some zip lining that we did on that excursion as well. There's a little dune buggy excursion. So we did some stuff off the resort and kind of some sketchy areas in Mexico, and you know, no big deal. And it wasn't until I got home from that vacation is when I got so sick. You know, I'll say the flu, but the flu isn't the right word here, because it was a flu that was beyond the flu. It was just a debilitating illness of all illnesses that I've ever had in my life. So anybody that's ever had Lyme, when you first get infected, you kind of sometimes come down with a huge flu or some type of interesting sickness at the beginning, right? So I had that. And I also I didn't notice right away, but it wasn't long after I got home, I had a bullseye rash basically under my eye. So it was interesting where you can get bit sometimes, right? You know, some people get bit in the legs or the arms, but mine was on my face. So I think it was Jessie that noticed that not long after I got home. She's like, "What's that mark under your eye? It looks very weird." But we didn't think anything of it at the time. We didn't even know. It was just kind of, okay, we noticed it, but we kept, you know, whatever, no big deal. So, but I kept this illness that I was struggling with after I came home from Mexico was so brutal that I went try and find some doctors to help me. They kind of took the blood tests and all these other things, and I told them I just went away to Mexico and I came back sick, so clearly there's some kind of connection here, you know. Is there, you know, some kind of infectious disease or something that I came back with? You know, I was swimming in caves and there were bats all over the place, and I was basically swimming in bat shit, so there's a lot of stuff there. So doctors didn't seem to care. They were just do what they normally do and do their normal rounds of blood tests, and of course I came back as healthy as you could be. So I did that for several months and I didn't get anywhere, and I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So it wasn't until maybe about 6 months after I got back from this Mexico trip was when I started to lose my vision. So my left eye right here, just one day I was sitting on the couch here, I think, you know, Jesse was on the computer and I was just sitting there doing something, watching TV, I think it was. And then my left eye just went completely white. So it's kind of hard to describe. You know, we'll have a little picture on the screen here to kind of show you what one side of my vision just looked like. So one minute I could see, the other minute just complete, like someone just, you know, like the thickest fog you could ever think of, you know, just on one eye. So that scared the living hell out of me. I remember sitting there, I was like, Jesse, she's like, yeah. I can't see it in my left eye. So she looked at me and, you know, she kind of thought I was joking at the beginning, but when she looked at me, I was kind of, you know, white as a ghost at this point, so she knew something was wrong. So we called the ambulance right away. So the ambulance came to our house and I got carried away back to the hospital, sat there for several hours. Finally I got to see, they got me in to see the ophthalmologist that was on call. So an ophthalmologist is basically an eye specialist. So I went to see him. He went in and, you know, he kind of looked in all around my eye and looked at the back of my eye and all these other things. And of course at the same time they were taking more blood tests. I had so much blood taken from me during this time that you can't even imagine. And I'm not very good by taking blood either, you know. I'm really, it's kind of a, I don't know, just I've never been good with needles, basically. So having this much blood taken me over time was really quite of an experience on its own. So they went through that, and of course the ophthalmologist didn't see anything really wrong either. He was just looking, saying, nothing major happening here, you know. So basically I left with no answers again. So, but one thing is when you do go blind like that and you call the ambulance and you get taken to the hospital, they do tend to bump you ahead of all the other people, which is interesting. I didn't really like that because I remember I could see people in the waiting area. Some of them were serious pain from somebody broke their leg and someone, you know, seriously cut themselves. There's a lot of people really struggling in that waiting room, and I got bumped ahead of all of them. You know, just apparently it's a, you know, when you see someone come in with blindness like that, they must have been worried, you know, that a blood clot or, you know, some kind of aneurysm or something is going on, right? So they take that pretty seriously. So I left there without any answers, and then I came back home, and of course, not, you know, weeks later it happened again. So we called the ambulance one more time. They took me back to the hospital and did some more tests again, more blood, and I had no answers. Everything's fine. You're healthy, right? So, and I'm blind. So clearly there's something they're missing. Anyway, so that went on for a while. I think we might have cycled through that about 3 times where we were back and forth to the hospital, and by about the 4th time it kept coming and going. Like when I went blind, it didn't just go blind permanently. You know, it would last only a certain amount of time. You know, the first time it might have been, you know, maybe 8 to 10 hours that it happened. Then eventually it kind of came back again. So I was just basically sat home all day, kind of called in sick from work, and I just sat at home until basically my eye came back. So that's kind of how it was. It kind of just phased in and kind of phased out, totally random. So you'd never know when it was going to happen, right? So that was worrisome for me. So by that time, the doctors were concerned. They didn't know what was going on. They couldn't find anything in my blood. So this is where I started to kind of get moved all over the place to start seeing different specialists. So I've seen specialists all over the Toronto area. I started seeing a neurologist because they were worried about something kind of with the brain there. So I saw him for a long time. Of course, I saw 2-3 different ophthalmologists. I even saw a neuro-ophthalmologist. So I was kind of dancing all around between these people, and I even got moved over to see a hematologist because they were trying to figure out something that they could, use as a marker. So a hematologist is a blood specialist, so they sent me to this woman, and she took pints and pints of blood. I remember that was the worst experience I've been through as far as taking blood, and I know people give blood all the time, it's no big deal, but they took a lot of blood from me that day, and I was very close to passing out. So it was very kind of traumatic for me to kind of go through that. So I went to go see this woman. I even went to go see a cardiologist. They were kind of worried maybe something was going on with the heart, because my fainting and heart palpitations and stuff were happening. So I went to go see a cardiologist. And then as we went through more and more tests, I was getting poked at, and like you wouldn't believe, this was continued on for months and months and months, just back and forth every week, going to this specialist, going to that specialist, all over the place. I'm sure anybody that who's going through Lyme might know what I'm talking about, because most doctors are clueless. They can't figure it out. So I think the last specialist I saw, I remember I was sitting in a cancer clinic. So there was a special blood kind of cancer specialist or something in this one ward in the downtown Toronto hospital. So I went to go see him. So I was basically sitting in a cancer clinic there with a bunch of cancer patients, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So I've been everywhere, and I really didn't get too many answers. It was actually the ophthalmologist that I saw, the third one, because I went through multiple ophthalmologists. He found that I was struggling with glaucoma. So I did have a diagnosis with glaucoma in my left eye. So kind of made a little more sense as to why I was going blind. So I had that, and the original test that I did showed that my glaucoma count was 56. So anybody that has ever had glaucoma before, you'll know that that's extremely high. So they were really worried about kind of getting that count down, because they were even talking about that I would lose my vision in my eye permanently. So I was dealing with that. And basically after more tests that I was dealing with the neurologist, he was going through all kinds of things, and he basically kind of found something through the MRI on my brain that I was basically kind of in a pre-multiple sclerosis state. So this was after about a year of kind of dancing around between specialists. So I finally had a little bit of something. Glaucoma, okay, that made sense. Pre-multiple sclerosis, that was kind of a scary thing to kind of go through. But I just felt that they were missing something. So the neuro-ophthalmologist that I went to go see, now that I had a diagnosis of glaucoma, he looked deeper into that. So he found that my optic nerve was badly damaged. So I had lost about 50% of my optic nerve, which was leading to kind of the visual disturbances. So whether that had anything to do with kind of the glaucoma, maybe, that buildup of pressure back there might have been doing something and putting too much pressure on the optic nerve, I don't know. But I did find that. So, and he was really, really worried that if you don't get this, glaucoma count down, that you could permanently lose your vision forever. So he was really making that statement to me and made sure that I heard that. So that was interesting. And then as time went on, of course, I wasn't getting any better. My health was just declining more. So at this point, I was dealing with, I was starting to lose a lot of my motor functions, losing the ability to kind of speak, losing the ability to just communicate and listen to people altogether. I really struggled even just having a conversation with someone. Of course, my skin was starting to go all crazy again. After I was dealing with psoriasis, that was coming back in all different forms. My lymph nodes were just consistently swollen, especially under my neck here. I can remember this went on for years. It was just, the nodes under here were so swollen, it was like I couldn't even swallow. It just felt like I was just constantly being choked to death. So that was happening. I basically just kind of felt like I was just burning from the inside out. You know, if you looked at my skin, everything would look fine, but it would just feel like my whole body and my skin was just on fire. Like it was just burning. I'd even kind of have to get some ice packs at certain times just to kind of give myself some relief. So this was happening. And I was just basically felt like I was just kind of losing my mind. You know, I couldn't think, couldn't talk without kind of, you know, kind of stumbling my words. So that was happening. And then I kind of started to lose basically all sexual function, you know. So, you know, by this time I was about 30 years old, and when you start to lose these functions, and, you know, it was tough. It was tough to go through that. So a lot of things were really starting to take shape here. So I was really starting to get a little worried, and especially when they were throwing multiple sclerosis out there, I was thinking, man, oh man, what am I going to do now? So more blood tests came. You know, the hematologist took a lot of blood, and they came back and said I was kind of showing some very low vitamin B12 deficiency. So my B12 was extremely low. So at one point there, they were giving me injections for that. So I had that discovered. And then they also found that my C-reactive protein, it was extremely high. So they found this. That's basically just kind of inflammation in the blood. So the hematologist found that too. So a couple things were coming in the blood that they found. So the neurologist as well, when he found out all this, he was really, really worried about my blood being too thick, because that's kind of what, you know, very high levels of C-reactive protein can do. It can really make your blood thick. My blood was like sludge. So especially up here with glaucoma and a lot of things, you know, feeding blood to the optic nerve and stuff like that, he was really worried about that. So you need to start seriously considering taking medication for that. So I mean, at this point I was handed medication for everything. I had stacks of medications for all the things that they were starting to find. So, but the funny thing is, I didn't take any of them. It's crazy to say, and I don't recommend this to anybody that's going through Lyme disease to just do these things that I did, but I refused to take any of these medications. At the time I didn't know why. It was just something, it was just leading me more and more, leading me more deeper into finding more truth to what was happening. I didn't really buy what these people were trying to sell me at this point. So something was, even though I was getting threatened from, not threatened, that's not the right word, but you know, all these specialists were concerned, you know, especially with my eye and a lot of these things that were happening. They didn't want to see me lose my vision, so they're really pushy to start taking these drugs, but I didn't do it. So this is kind of where I had this kind of more aha moment where I'm like, you know what, after a year of getting poked at and seeing all kinds of specialists all over the place, it's just, I can't do it anymore. I'm not getting any better. Everything's just getting worse. They're not finding anything that's going to help me. They're just giving me drugs. And I just had this kind of aha moment where I'm like, I'm going to start, I need to figure this out myself. So this is where I kind of lost a little bit more faith in the medical system. And I started to really look outside the box. This was kind of the first aha moment I had, and that was interesting. So that really sparked something, I think. So I really kind of meditated on that for a while. Not meditated in the, you know, real form of it, but just kind of looked at that, and I just knew there was something more to this story, and I wanted to keep digging deeper. So I basically, I didn't take any of the medications that were ever prescribed for me, and I have quite a stack full of them as well. So that was just a kind of a personal decision. I don't recommend that to anybody that has Lyme to kind of go ahead and go on this route. I really advise against that, to be honest with you. But this is just my experience. That's what I did, and it kind of led me down a different path. Let's put it that way. You know, I knew there was more. You know, I didn't take, you know, multiple sclerosis. That was not going to be my fate. You know, I didn't deep down I didn't believe that. So eventually it came, you know, I was still seeing various doctors in and around the area. The last doctor I ever did see, to be honest with you, I came into him, this is when, you know, I was probably at my worst at this point. You know, all of my symptoms were just skyrocketing, and you know, they were just going out of control at this point. So I was just desperate for some type of relief or some type of anything at this point. So last doctor I saw, he did another round of tests, and before he sent me home, he basically said, you know what, Kevin, I think there's one test we haven't done yet, and I want to do it because I think this might have something to do with a lot of your problems. And the test was basically for HIV. So after all of this, you know, this whole year of doctor after doctor and test after test, it was just, I couldn't do it anymore. You know, I had this big aha moment where it was like, you know what, I need to take control of this myself. And I remember coming home and I sat down on the couch with Jesse after, you know, I just told him that, you know, this doctor's gonna, you know, basically test me for HIV at this point. So I kind of had a moment where I just kind of sat there and just kind of, you know, said, well, what next? What do I do? You know, I just started kind of asking the big questions. And that's where I kind of just decided I'm going to take control of this myself. You know, I already went through this whole process. I didn't take any of the prescription drugs that they were telling me to do. So I figured, why not just go down my own path here? I'm going to try and figure this out myself. I'm going to start reading. I'm going to start learning. I'm going to start doing whatever I need to do to try and figure this out. So that was kind of a big moment that I had there.